All right, I think we're live.
Cool.
All right, I think we're live. Cool. All right. So we have a special guest today. We have Eric slash Strainflow, and he's gonna join us for automated testing.
And my video is frozen on your screen.
No. What can I do here? I wonder if it's good to have the window minimized.
I don't know.
Let's try that again. Is it? I think you're good now.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, give it a
Yeah,
feast.
there we go.
All right.
I've come back alive.
Okay, so let's do this. Welcome, Nandu. Welcome, Funky Boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're good to start. So today we're talking about automated testing, and this is something that we should have done a long time ago, but I wasn't quite ready for it, and I'm still not totally comfortable with it, or at least I'm not as well versed as I'd like to be to answer all your questions. But hopefully, there's enough content here to get you started. So in Kit we have automated extension testing. We have a framework to do this. It's based off of Python's vanilla unit test standard library, but what we've created a base class that subclasses from unit test, and then we have a whole framework for running it and reporting and all that. So we're gonna dig into that a little bit today, and um, and as far as documentation, if you go to docs.omniverse kit manual, we have this testing extensions with Python, and it's got a lot of information here. But what we're gonna do is some of this does need to be cleaned up a little bit. It has some internal documentation in here, things that aren't quite exposed to the public yet. So part of what I'm going to do here today is kind of help you go through this and say, yeah, don't worry about this. This is not exposed yet, or focus on these things. So it's not necessarily that this will never go out. It's that we're releasing our tool set little by little. So there may be some desire to eventually give you all of these things, but for today, not all of it is available.
Funky Boy has a really good question. Are you taking questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
He asked, when would you want to do this type of testing?
You want to do this type of testing always. So if you've been watching me, and I haven't done any tests, that's wrong. So I do want to try to get in the. I mean, the streams are a little tough. You don't want to watch me writing tests all the time. But yeah, unit tests, the testing that we're doing today gives you that confidence that when you give this out to somebody that it's going to work, and you can test your extension on different apps, test your extension with different updates to Kit, and you have that some security that it's going to work for your end users. Then there's the other thing that some folks like to do, which is test-driven development. You could write your tests before you start writing your extension, and as you're building your extension, at first all of your tests are going to fail, but as you start building out your extension, you have these guidelines that tell you when your extension is done, right? When all of your tests are done, you've got all your features in, you've got everything working. So that's another reason to dig into this early, is that you might want to go for a test-driven development approach, and you can look that up if you haven't yet. It's pretty interesting, an interesting way to work. So
If I can make a comment,
mhm.
I know that we've had a saying in my jobs where we do some unit tests that testing is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. And like tests are you need to update tests as much as you're writing new code. Tests may need to be updated to adapt to the new code that's written, or whether it's intentionally failing because features changed, or so yeah, it's definitely a never-ending journey.
Well, and Funky Boy made the comment, or he kind of a clarification. He said, so you might think your extension is working well, but you use this as a test before other users break it. And yeah, it's really, man, well, what do you think, Matt or Maddie?
Um, Trying to break that down a little bit in my head.
Yeah, and I might just say, okay, might want to start with like, what is a unit? Because that's one thing that I really didn't understand. Because I came into this as an engineer, right? As an engineering designer, like there was no pressure at all for me to do unit testing. And in fact, it was more like, why would you do that? That sounds like it's going to take forever, and we're busy.
Yeah,
Um, and so why would you do unit testing? And a lot of it is actually a lot of the benefit is how it gets you to restructure your code. Because before I did any unit testing, my code, I'd have blocks that did a lot of different things.
yep,
And the concept is to refactor your code into units where each unit does something very specific and has a very clearly defined outcome.
yeah, absolutely. So for sure, if you go by the traditional definition of a unit test, it would be the smallest, the atomic level, the smallest thing that you could test. You wanna make a unit test of that, and then by testing a lot of those units, then you can cover a lot of ground. Unit tests in the traditional sense isn't the only type of test, and it wouldn't cover everything. You have things like integration tests where you're testing, for example, two extensions working together. Um, but unit test in the case of this Python standard library is really just a framework that you could use for various types of tests. And you can look up different types of testing in software development, and you can adapt the unit test framework to a number of those different types of tests. So when we say unit test here, it's really just the framework. You are able to write tests for different types of tests, and we'll see that today with the example tests here. So any other questions about just general automated testing before we get into the kit stuff? I think it is a good idea to have a basic understanding before we dig into it.
No question. I don't see any questions.
Cool. And yeah, any test is better than no test, right? It gives you some amount of confidence that your stuff is working. With no test, you honestly don't know what works and what doesn't. And so we're going to be talking about code coverage and things like that. That's also available, and that'll help you feel more confident about what you're doing. And then the other thing about testing in general is, yeah, I've always felt like, at least in the line of work that I've had done previously, I felt like there wasn't enough time to write tests. But I probably spent more time manually testing than if I had just written some tests in the first place. So when you don't have that confidence that your tests are testing well for you, then you just end up spending a lot of time just doing manual tests and then retesting manually, and you lose a lot of time with that could have been spent just writing a test in the first place.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right, so this is this documentation. So it is basically just the unit test framework with async and await support. So um, a lot of our API uses coroutines. It uses the async IO functionality, and so we've built this base class for your tests that leverages it has async and await built in, so that if you call some API that you need to await because it's asynchronous, you can do that, and you don't need to. We don't have everybody rolling their own async await support into their tests. So
It's nice.
should be handy. Yeah. Um, this part we can ignore for the most part. We're not building Python extensions just yet, and it by with the approach that we have internally, it would actually give you a batch file for your extension, and you could just run that batch file to run your tests. We don't have that available, but that's okay. What else do we have here? For the most part, testing is just you execute kit with the Omni kit test extension, enable your extension and a few other flags, and then you've got it. And it'll run your test for you within kit. So that's pretty much it there. And here it goes into your first test, which we can do that now with the extension that I have here. So since the last release of code, the 2.0 actually, not 3.0, when you create a new extension project, the template now includes a test. So actually a couple tests. So this is the extension. Excuse me. This is the extension. This is a window that has an add and reset button. Every time you click add, it updates the label to it increases the count on a label, and then when you reset, it resets the text to empty. So this is what you get when you first create an extension using that button. And there's also this public function that just does you give it a number, and it does that number to the power of that number. And then if we jump into the tests, there is this tests folder, and here is the test hello world. Hello, Paul. In here we have
So this is the default extension. You get this for free.
Yep. So this is a great place to start for just understanding the testing framework.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So OmniKit test. This is the primary extension that includes the base class that we want to derive from. There's also this UI test extension, which we'll talk about for simulating UI interaction. So we were talking about unit tests, but this would be a UI test that you can actually simulate clicking on buttons and entering text and all that. So yeah, we can do all of that with this framework. So it's not just unit testing. And then here's the import to my extension that I created, this Hello World extension. So whenever you write a test, you can write multiple tests. You can write one test per class, or you could write multiple tests in a single class. This is all basic unit tests framework logic, but you want your class to derive from async test class. And then for every test in this class is defined as a function. And the function starts with test underscore. This is unit test convention. When you tell the unit test framework to run your test, it's going to look for test classes, and also functions that start with test underscore. So that's all just standard test runner logic here.
Yeah, and so far, I mean, set up, tear down, defining async tests. This seems pretty, I mean, just like your typical unit testing setup. It doesn't seem anything like it's out of the blue or anything.
Yeah, and so to just
That's nice.
to break this down a little bit, if you haven't seen a test example like this, um, typically there's three steps to a test. It would be some setup code that you don't want to necessarily test, and then tear down code. So and then your actual code that you're testing. So in the setup, you would do things like say, open up a stage that has some test data that you want to test. Um, and this would happen for you would use this function for every test written in this class. So you can imagine that if you wanted to test different scenes, maybe you write a class per test scene, and in each setup you load a different scene. So after it's run the setup to say open a scene, then it'll run it'll run one of these tests, and if typically then you need to have some sort of assert some sort of check to make sure that the result from your whatever you executed from your code is the result that you expected. So in unit test we have a number of assert almost equals, comparing dictionaries, greater than, less than, whether an object is an instance of something or if it's none. Or so there's lots of different ways to compare the results to make sure that your stuff is working. So in this case, we are doing 4 to the power of 4, and we expect that the result is equal to 256.
Can you put a custom message? I know in some frameworks in the assert functions you can put a message that is printed if the test fails.
Yeah, I don't remember if if this gets
Maybe
printed on the fail, but I think you're right. So there's the message.
got it. Fail if okay, cool. Another question I had is sometimes there's a global setup and teardown that happens before any of them and after all of them are run. Is there like a global setup and teardown too?
Um,
I forget the exact terminology for that. Maybe that's just the constructor and the destructor, huh?
Let me double check here. So that would be setup class.
Setup class. Got it.
So I think that, yeah, that would, if I,
Oh, got it. And teardown class. There you go.
yep,
Cool. 'Cause I just know sometimes I've needed that before.
yep. So all of this is really, I don't know if we have async ones for, I guess you don't need async for this stuff, but yeah, all the stuff that's in unit test is available. So you can absolutely look up the unit test documentation to see what's available. Cool. So once your test is run, if all of your asserts are returned true, that everything is equal as expected, or that you're getting the results that you want, and your code doesn't raise any errors, because I could run this and something catastrophically wrong could happen and it raises an error. There's also checks to see if errors are raised. So if you want to make sure that your code is catching errors as well and reporting them, you can do that. If everything goes well, then it would do then your test would succeed, and it also whether it succeeds or fails, it does the tear down as well, and then it would move on to the next test. You could also then have logic to say, if one test fails, just stop the whole thing. When you get documentation from the Omniverse launcher, let me double check that.
Those even have the messages we were talking about.
This is the one that goes to 104, goes to this link for me, Nandu. Let me know if let me know what you get. I'm guessing all links go to here now. So it would take you to this prod kit area, which is in our docs.omniverse location, where all our other doc portals are. And then you go into kit manual to get into the extension testing section. Let me know if that's not the case, or if it goes somewhere else, you can link me to. Cool. All right. So we got our test. Yeah, so I think we can go ahead and run this. The way that you can run this, you could run this from the command line, like this testing documentation was talking about. You could essentially create your own batch file. But what I think is easier to start is to go open up code, because you probably have code open while you're developing your extension. Here's the extension that I was talking about. I can add, reset. So that's the basic functionality, not too bad. And if I go here, for every extension, there is a tests tab. And you can just, nice. Yeah, you can, if you've got everything set up the same way as the Hello World extension, you just click run, it'll run all of them, and you should get, yeah.
Or you can just run, if you know the name of the test, you can just run the one test, it looks like.
Yeah, so you can do, what's this one called? So let me actually,
That's cool.
So you can filter and say, just run this one test by using basic.
There's that UI mode. What's that? Or, sorry.
No,
I like to click all the buttons.
No. You're going exactly where I want you to. So UI mode gives you like this validation UI, and so here it's identified the tests that exist in this. This is the test class. There's only one, and the two functions, and so I can run all of them. I can select all, or select a selection of them that maybe I'm only testing one part of my extension, one part of my window. I can do that. And then I can go ahead and run that one test, and it's super fast, right? And once, yep.
What? Okay, I'm guessing opens the source code. But what in heaven's
Soak
name is soak?
runs multiple times. I'm not going to do it because it's rather long, but it's basically like a stress test. It will run the same test over and over and over again to make sure that you're not having some error on the 100th try.
Or maybe like a race condition or
exactly.
That sort of thing. Yeah, okay.
And then test hello world, and then the test window button. This one's actually a UI test, so it's it actually opened the UI in order to do that test. It clicks on the add button twice. And it resets and then clicks on the add button twice.
How does that, what makes it a UI test in the code? Like, nope. Oh dear.
I probably shouldn't have closed that. But no worries. So this opens up a new app when you do that. So I can just close that, relaunch. And I get a new UI window here. Yeah, I shouldn't have closed that UI window. As long as that window is available, I can run that as many times as I want.
Right.
So that's that. I think if I add another test, I think it's supposed to pick it up automatically. Let's give that a quick try. Some of this is a little exploratory.
Sure. Well, but my question there is, with that UI test, I guess we just know it's a UI test because we have it's clicking things, huh?
Yeah. I'll dig into that in a moment. I just wanted to double check this. Yeah. Sure. So as I'm writing new tests, it adds it. I can run it. That test doesn't do anything, so it's just going to pass automatically. Oh. So all good there. What makes this a UI test?
Well, I know it's clicking the buttons, but will the unit test UI always open a new copy of the extension for testing, or does it only do that if you have a UI test in your test?
I believe it only does that on a UI test, because I can run these without the window. It'll actually run in no window mode. versus this one, which opens the window.
Is that just,
So
yeah, does it know? Just know because you have some UI calls in there, or do you,
it's
or is there some metadata you have to tag it?
that's
Oh,
a
there
good.
it is. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I don't actually know about that one. I'd have to double check.
Got it.
Um, yeah, there might be something in the framework that's checking that. So UI test, we can dig into this now. UI test, for the most part, it's just a matter of finding the widgets that you want to interact with, interacting with it, which is typically in a wait because you need to wait a frame for it to go through the click and the callback and all that. And so this was an import that I did that was already in here, right? OmniKit unit, OmniKit UI test. And these are the kinds of things that you can do with it. You can emulate different mouse and keyboard and key combinations. You can add human delay if you need to, if something takes a little bit longer than just a single frame for the update. You can wait n number of updates, and it works with context menus and all that as well. So this is using the path syntax that we have in the UI query extension. And the basic idea is that you can, our UI is nested, right? It's basically a hierarchy frame v stack. Each stack, each context is kind of a parenting relationship in this case. So what we have here is my window. My window has a frame, and then this says recurse and through all the children, all ancestors, until you find a button. This is an array syntax, so it's saying, and then look through all the children and find a button. Find a button with the text that is add, that's equal to add, and then same thing here, but text equal to reset. So at that point, it'll give you a button and two button objects, and then you can go ahead and click on those to interact with them.
But so I've got a couple. So how do I? Because the add button is the first button, and this other button is the second button. But that looked like that query syntax looked the same to me. So it's looking a little magical that they grab different. Oh, you're grabbing one with text that's add and one with text that's reset.
Yep. And this is iterating through all the buttons. So
All the
presumably
buttons in my frame.
all sibling buttons, right? If we
So the
look
first.
at
Sorry, go ahead.
if we look at here, there's an H stack with two buttons that are siblings. So if let me pull up the documentation for this to make it a little bit more clear.
Yeah, I'm struggling. I'm not gonna lie, I'm struggling with that syntax a little bit.
There's this path syntax here, and so this is what the syntax looks like by internally, and you can see this in the UI inspector as well, in the inspector window. So this is kind of what ours looks like. It's an H stack, and then the add button would be button 0, and the reset button would be button 1. So by putting a wildcard here, we're saying to loop through all the children of the all the siblings.
Oh, I see. And then with the star or double, so find children recursively, that's gonna find all children at all levels.
Exactly.
So it's just so basically, if you it's gonna find every button in the whole UI.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And then and so you could grab an individual, the third button or whatever, but instead this is just grabbing every button.
Yeah, and then our qualifier that makes sure we get the one that we want is we know there's only one button with the text add.
But if we had used, instead of wildcards, individual numbers, we wouldn't need to have a qualifier like that. We could just grab the first button and the second button if we wanted.
Yeah, let's try it, right? We can do that.
Instead of looking through
Let's
all the
do,
children recursively, we could say like frame and then VStack one and
yeah,
then
you could do the
HStack
full
one.
path. Yeah.
We could do a hard-coded path if we wanted to. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so I have that test updated. So theoretically now, let's just go ahead and I closed the other window. So let's relaunch it
I probably broke it.
and we'll see. There we go. Same deal.
Oh, phew. Okay.
And
Wait, is that the one that we edited? Or is that the one you added?
this is the one we edited. So
Oh, okay.
the other one is empty.
Oh, right. They changed order.
Yeah, I don't know if the order is the same. I put it.
Oh, never mind.
I don't know
I
if,
just got
if the
lost.
order is maintained or not, but
I just got a little lost. Never mind. My bad.
so yeah, either approach works. Do what works for you. Um, Obviously this is more flexible, right? If I end up changing the hierarchy or anything like that, or if I had a third button in this stage stack, this test would still work. So
And I just gotta say, I think these UI tests would be so useful because a lot of times what you get back from a user is like, I clicked on this stuff and then it broke.
mhm.
And so with these UI tests, you can simulate that and simulate whatever their actual workflow was. And yeah, for me, in my experience, it's the UI tests are a great way to track down bugs that your users let you know about.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to everything. I agree that UI tests can be these workflow tests. You can do an end-to-end test of, okay, I'm going to test this workflow. They're going to press this button, then they're going to move this slider, and you get a real test of what a real user would do. The con to that is that UI tests of every framework that I've tried can be fragile because of that asynchronous part of it. That's why we have all this special handling for human delay and wait and updates, and so they can be sensitive, and then they also are slower to run. So that's another thing. When you have a testing suite of hundreds or thousands of tests, how long is it going to take you to get through those tests? If it takes you more than then if it takes too long, then your developers don't run them, and then what's the point? Because ideally, you want to have your developers run all these tests before they put in any code to make sure they haven't broken any functionality. So pros and cons. Whereas a traditional unit test, where you're testing functions, those are always very fast and much more reliable, less flaky. So
Makes so much sense.
yeah, our testing is an art. There's definitely a reason why we have QA engineers that make a career out of this, and they know all the tricks and all the ways to squeeze the most out of this and get the best results. So cool. What else can we say about this test? Once you have this button, we can look at all the things that you can do with this. You can grab properties like a UI widget. So this is what is returned from the find is a reference widget, and then you can grab the widget and then grab all your widget properties, right, from that you're using in your code. Positions and center and all that, that's all relevant for where, if you want to say specifically where you want to click on a particular UI element, that's important. Bringing things to the front, for example, windows that are floating. Right click, double click input to emulate keyboard presses of people typing. drag and drop functionality. It's really impressive how much is available here for UI testing.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's impressive.
So in this simple case, we grab this label ref, grab the widget, and then we can edit the text property on that widget, or query its value. Yeah, Paul is saying that when we want to promote extensions from the community, it's being able to see tests included in your extensions and seeing them pass. That makes our job easier and gives us the confidence as NVIDIA to give that the seal of approval of, yeah, we recommend this for the community at large. So we want to see more testing for sure from the community, and part of the reason why we want to share this with you.
I think one, and I just want to step in and say I came from companies like Ford and from the aerospace industry, and one of the first concerns they might have if they wanted to use your extension is they would say, well, but does it have support? And I think that in so if you want to make a business selling extensions to companies like that, you really want to provide unit tests and you really need to provide support, or else they're just not going to be interested.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. If somebody's going to pay for something, they want to make sure that it works. They want to have some proof. They'll test it out themselves, but if you can also show tests where it's working, also very important. All right, let's move into. I think Paul brought up a good point about code coverage. So you can also generate a coverage report. So I'm going to run this. It's going to run all the tests. And it's running on my other screen here. And here it automatically opens up this HTML page. And we should talk about this test output location in a moment. So this actually includes all of my runs of testing. This is some automatic runs that I did with just running all of them. This is where I had that failure because I closed the window. And then this is where I had the UI open and I ran it a bunch of times in different orders and all that. And then these are the last ones that ran. We get a report here of everything that happened. How long did my test take? Like I was saying, that's all important. How long does startup take for the app? And then code coverage, 98% code coverage. Obviously, this is a very small extension, so we tested basically the two functions. And
what's a good number? What's a good number for code coverage? Like, yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know, actually. That's a good question.
Hmm.
What I can say though is, well, I just wanted to show this. When you click on, this is showing code coverage for every module. And when I click on this module, it shows me that this is the only line that isn't tested because we don't test on shutdown. So that is where that missing coverage is happening there. So this is actually a very well tested extension. So that's the coverage report. There is also that gets written out to this test output location. You have all of your test results here with the logs. So if you need to, you can go back and dig into what errors happened, and you have that history apart from just the report. It's using coverage.py for generating the coverage report, and this is just an output of the summary of the actual test results. So all of that is available. the reason that I bring up this location, apart from knowing where that is that you can write out more data to that location. So you could write other logs, or you can write test data that is generated from the tests. The way that you get that is, where are you? Get test output path. So in your tests, you can get this output path and use that for writing out any additional data that you need to write out. So another little bit that I wanted to add there. We have image tests, but I won't go into that now. That's something that I need to find out if we're promoting that yet. But apart from UI tests, you could also do image comparison tests. So you can take a screenshot of your user interface after during a test run, or at any point in a test run, and then have a key. You can store a golden image, the baseline of what that UI should look like when it's successful, and compare them, and then have a threshold of if it's 90% the same, then we say that the test passed, and we have all of that available. I just don't know if we're promoting that for external use just yet. But if you wanted to dig into it, it's part of the UI, Omni UI extension. So Omni UI has lots of great extensions, and it uses this Omni UI test. And if we look at something, this finalized test function will actually take a golden image and compare it with a capture that it does in that moment, and it tells you if the comparison is a good comparison, and so you can validate you can use that as an assertion to say if your test succeeded or not. And so that brings up another good tip here, is that if you want to be inspired by more tests apart from just the basic test that we provide with the extension template, you can look up in most of these extensions, you can find tests and see how other people are doing it. So best way to learn is to see how other developers work and learn from their experience, and also maybe from their mistakes. Any questions? And like Paul was saying, is if we all follow, use these tools that are available, then we have this common language for testing and for talking about how resilient our extensions are, and being able to test, have automated testing on the NVIDIA side, and your customers can test on it as well, and so this really opens up the door for talking about how extensions are built, and how solid they are for production use.
Yeah, Nandu is making the comment that this is really helpful to ensure our extensions are published ready.
Yep. So the other thing is I've been showing you this UI. I said we have batch files that are not available to you yet. I think the UI is a great way to get started for just testing interactively and as you're developing. But if you wanted to start looking into running these in a batch method and some sort of integration pipeline, you can
Oh, you can
Yeah, you can debug test. It'll pause before the test run. You can attach a debugger from VS Code, for example, and then you can debug as the test is running. So I haven't dug into that yet. You can choose which app you're testing with. For the most part, this test extension kit app is a good idea. So before I go into the batch testing, I do want to mention a couple of things about just best practices here. If you test with this app, you basically get an app with no dependencies loaded. And that is a good thing to do because you have no guarantee that wherever your extension runs, they will have all the extensions that you depend on. So by using that test kit app, it forces you to make sure that your dependencies are well defined, that everything that you depend on is listed here. Otherwise, this test app will throw an error immediately telling you, hey, you're saying you need the viewport, but you're interacting with a viewport, but the viewport's not loaded. You need to make sure that the viewport's a dependency for your extension. So that's really good. But you can also, in your extension.toml, there are settings that you can add for just when the tests run. So if there is a dependency that you want to throw in just for the sake of the test, then you can add it there. And these are ones that are just dependencies for the test, not for your extension itself. So say in the case that I do want to test against USD data, maybe I want to bring in some dependencies to be able to load a stage, some USD dependencies. I can list them here. It will only be used for my tests, and it won't have any effect on what's actually required when I give this to another user and they run it in some app. Yeah, dependencies is an easy thing to overlook and also a very easy thing to fix. Is because we often test in code or create or we develop in those apps, those have everything in the kitchen sink included, and so you just turn on your extension and everything's already there for you. But we really do need to be in the habit of imagining if somebody were to open my extension, load my extension in an empty kit app, what are all the things that need to be loaded in order to make my extension work? So super important. There's also other settings that you can define here. So let's look at the documentation. I don't think this is an exhaustive list of what you can add here, but you can name your tests. So you could actually have different configurations for different test runs, and you can run these as separate processes with different configurations.
So if there are different versions of some dependency that are giving you fits, you could set up some different test runs that use different versions of that dependency.
Yeah, or if you wanted to have different arguments for your extension, you could set that up here with these separate test runs. There's this one that's really interesting, is that you can define pip API requirements that are only for your test. So if you wanted to bring in some, for example, I think this parameterized library, I think that probably lets you do some parametric testing of automatically generating parameters for your functions, so that you can do retest the same function with multiple argument values and make sure that it works against lots of different options. So you can include pip API just for your test, which is pretty cool. You can add what was this one? This is for filtering. So if you wanted to group your tests into separate runs, you can group them by name using that.
Oh, that's nice. So
That
only run certain tests under certain uh, setups, if you will.
Yep.
So Nandu's got a great question.
Um,
Nandu's
yeah, go ahead and read it.
okay. It says also, if I publish my extension as a compiled code, then can the other developer run tests on it? This will be helpful for deployment of extensions for our customers.
So yeah, I suppose you could have somebody else run tests on it. The point would be that generally you want to think about in your test what is the extension under test. Usually we say application under test. In this case, I guess the terminology would be extension under test, and you only want to test. You want your test to focus on just testing that functionality, right? You don't want a bunch of tests that test OpenStage. That might be one of the most best tested functions because everybody needs to open a stage to do things typically. But yeah, as you're running your tests, you could have another extension testing your extension B testing extension A. You just have to be okay with that. What I will say is it addresses that you said an extension as compiled code and have another developer. Yeah, you might have to clarify a little bit on that. But as far as the compiled code goes, um, there is this testing extension of the C++. I don't know. I haven't explored this yet to see how much of this is available. It may be. It may be available because we have a lot more tooling on the C++ side that we make available. But if it's but actually the recommendation typically is if you have C++ code, you typically have Python bindings, and so the recommendation what most teams on the NVIDIA side do is they will write test to test the Python bindings. If that way you're testing both the Python bindings and also the C++ code that it's calling. So that's the recommendation I think for now. But we do, if you wanted to, you could absolutely look into C++. But yeah. Any other questions? We were talking about settings. Other cool features you can, so it is fairly full featured. You can do things like at unittest.skip to skip a test that's failing. So if you have some issue that is a known issue and you're addressing it, but you don't want it to keep reporting on nightly runs or however you're running your tests that it's failing, you can actually just skip that test outright and hopefully put a comment or something as to why that test is being skipped. So that's available.
It says there you can use decorators. So there must be other decorators too they could use.
Yeah, from unit test, I don't know all of them, but that would come from unit test. Blah 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 blah. Whether you can mark tests as unreliable, just to give more feedback. This is, I think, more on the NVIDIA pipeline, just things that we do to mark things to provide more information for our test runs. You can list the tests. Let me check my notes really quick to see if I'm missing anything here. Test filter. Oh, as far as where tests are found, Yes. So by default, it's going to look for tests. The framework's going to look for tests in whatever your extension or whatever your default import is uh, for your extension. So this would be my default import. It's going to look for a folder called tests, and then it'll recurse in there looking for tests, and typically, and then from there it's typical unit tests logic. It will any modules that are prefixed with test underscore, it knows that those are modules with tests in them, and then it will also look for, like I said, classes that inherit from the unit test base class, which this one does. Click through that and just confirm here, unit test case. And also functions that are prefixed with test underscore. So I think I can go ahead and demo that here. No, what am I doing? It's just that. I think that's how you do it. So if I do UI mode.
Pick that up, huh?
I think so, yeah. So if you have a preference for I think I lied. I may be confusing test frameworks, but it'll be outlined in the unit tests. I'm pretty sure you can do non-class based testing with unit test if you just want to write functions. But classes is probably better because you got the whole setup and all that setup teardown. The other bit that we were going to get into is what if I want to set up a pipeline for testing these from the command line, or maybe I just want to open a terminal and run my tests from here without having code open. You can do that. Like I said, internally we have those batch files that get built with your extension, but if you run a test here, you can see exactly what's necessary. So if I scroll all the way to the top here, it is running KEXE and then this Omni app test ext.kit. And it enables my extension that I want to test. Some settings here, log file, blah, blah, blah. And then the other important thing is these ext folders for finding all the extensions that my extension may depend on. You need to make sure that those paths are available there. And here's the enabling UI test. So I could copy that message and then put that into a terminal, tweak it a bit if I need to. It's rather long, but that's the basic idea there. So there's my tests. Ran 3 tests. Everything's good. Okay. So everything's good there. Let's take a quick look at what that kit file says. Right, it's just an app. I think it's in kit. So yeah, it doesn't have much defined here. But if you didn't want to have so many flags, you could move lots of these things into settings. You can make your own kit file based off of this one. Move all of these settings into that kit file, and that'll reduce the number of args that you have here. All of these can be defined in a kit file. So that would be much more practical if you wanted to set up a testing pipeline. Cool. That's about everything I had to cover here. I could Eric, you got any other ideas, questions?
I mean, just the ones that you can't answer, like how do you know if your tests are good, right?
Yeah, it is a little subjective. There's also false confidence in you could have one test and it 100% success rate, and you're not testing anything.
Well, I could give myself 100% code coverage just by making everything pass, you know?
Yeah, or yeah, you could have one test that makes sure that it hits the entry point, that hits everything, and then it just passes automatically,
Yeah.
and you've got 100%. So it is like I said, it's a little bit of an art to evaluate what's good, what's not, and what gives you a good level of confidence. There's
Yep.
this test output token if you wanted to go that route as well. I mentioned this function to get it to it, but there's also a token if you wanted to build paths off of that. You can ignore all this repo test stuff. We haven't made that available yet. Anything that says Team City is obviously TC stands for Team City. That's obviously not available to you unless you happen to stand that up yourself.
This is so cool. This is really nice. I'm very impressed with how like feature rich this test suite is.
Yeah, for sure. I think.
I did not expect to see UI tests today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the things that I really appealed to me from Kit is that you have this testing framework. We had this opportunity to build things from scratch, and we built things that other DCCs haven't made available to their end users, to their developers. You can test, for example, Maya, but you have to do a lot of work to just stand it up for yourself. And here we're just saying, oh, you want to develop extensions? Great. And here's a testing framework for it. And we also have our Hello World app has everything, shows you everything you need to start writing tests. So I'm very, very pleased with that. We were talking about dependencies. This shows you our dependencies here. This is the only dependency that I've declared, but it does bring in, this one brings in quite a few extensions. So that's another thing to look at as you're developing, is looking at what dependencies you're bringing in, navigating the structure and understanding. Maybe you are only defining one dependency, but that brings in lots of other things, and understanding what your extension is actually using under the hood is a good thing to do. Cool. Well, I am going to find out where we are with the image comparison testing that we do, and if that's something that we want external developers to start using? And if it is, then I can do another session talking specifically about that type of testing. Other than that, let's get out there and write some tests and give this a shot.
So cool. Yeah, I just want, and I wonder if there's user analytics, because I know that when I was doing mobile apps, one thing that was really useful was I could basically log what my users were doing, and then I could use that to create UI tests. But I don't know if we do that. It's got a whole set of privacy problems, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the policy is around that. We can have telemetry, um, but you're right. I think there's a lot to consider as far as privacy and how that's rolled out. So something to think about for sure, and to look into for the future. All right. Well, if you have any questions about testing, I'll be digging into this more. This was just an intro, and if I find anything else that's interesting that warrants another session like this, we can dig into it deeper. Otherwise, you'll see more test writing from me, and hopefully we can talk more about tests as we go along. Thank you, Eric, for joining and for all the good questions and commentary. And thanks everyone else for watching.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys tomorrow. Let's sorry, one last thing. Let's talk about what's going on this week. We have today we have the project assembly for AECO. Last AECO USD live stream that we had was really interesting. So check that out. We have Learn With Me tomorrow, the Winter Challenge live stream also tomorrow, Eric's live stream on Thursday. What are you working on, Eric?
Well, we have a crank slider mechanism, and we'll be writing like a little extension that tracks the position, velocity, and acceleration of different parts of that mechanism and plots them in an extension. And Maddie's going to be joining me to help me out.
Cool. We should write some tests.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I think we should.
Cool. And then developer office hour on Friday, and and the Omniverse Machinima live sync is also on Friday. If you didn't catch the live sync live stream last Friday, I encourage you to check that out on the NVIDIA Omniverse YouTube channel. Pretty cool to see a handful of artists all working together live on a stage and building up a scene together and live syncing between apps and between themselves. Super interesting. Cool. I will see you guys around. Like I said, reach out to us if you have any questions on Discord or on the forums. And thanks for coming. See ya.
Bye.